Alright, I gotta talk about this garbage. The New Way Forward Act. One of the biggest pieces of political garbage I've ever heard of. They want to reform the immigration laws so that if someone's in this country illegally and they commit a serious crime, they won't get deported. Basically, what they would like to do is make the entire country a sanctuary city. The way it is now, if you commit a serious crime, and there's a whole host of them that qualify, and you're here illegally, you are subject to deportation. But the Democrats have introduced this new act that would wipe all that away, that would make it basically legal for people to commit crimes who aren't here legally and wouldn't get deported for it. So basically, they're handing away your rights and security for the votes, and that's what this is all about, don't shit yourself, of people who aren't even supposed to be here in the first place. And that isn't even the tip of the iceberg. As part of this New Way Forward Act, should it be passed into law, all the people who have been deported would be welcomed back into this country on the taxpayer's dime. In other words, you and me would have to pay for people who didn't have a right to be here in the first place and were deported because they committed a serious crime to come back into this country and potentially do it again with no serious consequences, leaving them even more of a burden on the taxpayer because they're in the legal system, in the justice system, and you can't get rid of them, even though they don't have a legal right to be here in the first place. So, what's it really all about? The fact that the Democrats can't compete in a war of ideas and would be more than happy to undermine your rights, my rights, and anybody else's rights along the way who has a legal right to be here in order to gain someone else's vote. How they actually intend to implement that into the system, I'm still not sure. But I'm sure as an attachment or just after the New Way Forward Act was approved, which it damn sure better not be, they'll be saying that illegals should have the right to vote. And seeing as how they're not from this part of the world and they don't know how our system works and they might feel beholding to the people that said, yeah, even though you broke our laws, come on in, do it again. Who do you think they're going to vote for? This is what happens when we overlook or take for granted security. This is what happens when people aren't willing to get involved or use the convenient excuse that their vote doesn't count. If your damn vote didn't count, do you really think they'd be trying to pull this bullshit? I think not. I've said in the past that it isn't very often that these people come up with original ideas. And believe it or not, the New Way Forward Act is no different. Because it's basically a carbon copy of what the European Union has done to the rest of Europe. Bringing in a bunch of people who aren't from that part of the world and giving them more rights to the citizens that were legally there in those countries in the first place. And that is exactly what they're trying to do here. So, if you would like to be considered a second class citizen in your own country, not unlike the people who are in the European Union right now, that had a legal right to occupy those countries in the first place? Keep looking the other way. Keep saying ridiculous things like one side of the coin is no different than the other, and that our votes don't count, that everything is already set in stone and nothing can be done. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that's what they want you to think. And the sheeple fall for it, allowing them to further their agenda, undermine our rights and our freedoms, and take away what should be our children's futures, all in the name of inclusion and diversity for a bunch of people that didn't have a legal right to be here in the first place, who they would be more than happy to put ahead of American citizens and their rights that are guaranteed them under the Constitution, seeing as how they are citizens, and put a group of people over them that don't have a legal right to be here in the first place. Sound ridiculous? That's because it is. But that's exactly what they're trying to accomplish. And should people continue making the same excuses not to get involved, not to raise an eyebrow when they see things are just a little bit off or what have you, they'll get away with it. So remember these times, should things go the other way. For when you have to explain to your children and your grandchildren what freedom used to be like, or at least was in a limited capacity, and what you didn't do to stop it, what could have been done in hindsight to prevent it. Someone wrote to me recently in a comment saying words to the effect, life is hard enough, and I don't want to do anything to make it more difficult. Totally understandable. But at the expense of your security, at the expense of your children or grandchildren's futures, what do you do? What's your excuse? Because not taking an interest, not using your limited freedoms while you can, or what have you, puts that in jeopardy. And in the end, will make life that much more difficult. Because I've said this before, but it bears repeating. They want your liberty. They want your freedom. Hell, they want your creativity. And they'd be more than happy to make you a second-class citizen, putting you under the people who don't have a right to be here in the first place. I'll even make a little confession. I like chaos. I grew up in the midst of chaos. And for me, whenever it comes around, it kind of feels like going home again. I've spent a lifetime dealing with lunatics. And this one actually is the least of my concerns. But even she has to be dealt with some responsibility, with some care. Because if I don't handle her properly, she's going to come out in the world and bite somebody right in the ass. Because for the most part, she doesn't like anybody but me. Because she had to grow up in a little tiny box with a shock collar on set to the highest level so she wouldn't bark. And if I don't run my security right, somebody's going to get hurt. So a new way forward? Sure, I suppose that's exactly what it is. Because should it be allowed to be enacted, it'll take this country someplace that it's never been before. Someplace I will tell you people who say your vote doesn't count, and one side of the coin is no different than the other, and that it's all been predetermined and we can't do anything about it, that you do not want to go.